welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us. Obviously, the webinar today is going to be best practices working remotely. I want to really thank everyone for making some time to attend our live version of this. I know that things are a little crazy right now in the world. So again, we really wanted to thank people for making the time out to join us live. So first things first, what I want to do is I want to go through the agenda. So the agenda is I'm going to do a quick intro on IVCi for those of you who are not familiar with who we are as a company. I'm also going to go through some technical meeting expectations. I'm also going to introduce Dan, and then Dan is going to kick off his presentation. So he's going to talk about working from home, the tips for success, keeping up morale, as well as how to run, host, and work in a remote environment. And towards the end, we're going to have a question and answer. But I'm going to go through that for the technical meeting expectations. So first things first, IVCi intro. So who are we? We are a global AV integration company. We've been in business for 25 years. We do, like I said, we specialize in global design, deployment, and support. What sets us apart from several of our other integrator friends is that we have a main focus on a customer experience. We're not a big box store. So we focus we're very focused on customer experience. We also specialize in AV as a service as well. So I just wanted to just give a quick overview, intro and stuff. You're more than welcome to check out our website. There's plenty of information there if you're looking for it. So for the webinar technical expectations, Dan and I, as we were putting this presentation together, had said that one of the things, this is going to be your first lesson in working remotely, and that's always setting webinar technical expectations. So it's really just setting up the flow of the meeting and making sure that people understand what tools are available for them to utilize, as well as how everything is supposed to go to make sure that we limit interruptions and make sure things go smoothly. So for this particular webinar, what we're going to be focusing on for now is we have two Q&A sessions. We're going to have one in the beginning and one in the end. And by all means, enter your questions now. And for the first session, you'll see the Q&A box that will be there for you. So enter your questions now for the first session if you have them. If you don't, no big deal. We also have the panelist and moderator. Obviously, I'm the moderator. By the way, my name is Christy Hopper. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager here at IVCi. I apologize, I did not introduce myself. But I am the moderator. And of course, we have our panelist, Dan Abrams. We're going to be the only ones with video, and we're going to be the only ones with sound. But we still want to make it interactive. So like I said, that's what you're going to use your Q&A box for. If you do have a question during the presentation, by all means, again, use the Q&A. We're going to try to address it at the end. If there's too many questions, we'll obviously send out some information following the webinar with some answers to those questions that maybe we didn't get to. So the questions, you can ask, like I said, you can ask at any time, but they're going to be answered in the designated sections. You can raise your hand as well if it's something, again, I will keep my eye on it. If it's something that I feel like it's worth cutting into the presentation for, I absolutely will do that. If not, again, please use the Q&A. So Dan Abrams is our Vice President of Business Development. He's been here for 5+ years at IVCi managing enterprise bid teams in business, but he does so much more than that, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about that if he'd like. He has 20 years of combined experience, project management experience. He's based out of San Diego, California, and part of the reason why Dan is so perfect for actually going off of this webinar and sharing his expertise is because that's literally what he does. He manages a very wide remote team across the nation. So of course, I'll let him elaborate into that. But for right now, I will actually kick this off to Dan so he can begin. I will be muted, but by all means, like I said, I will cut in if I need to for someone that raises their hand. So without further ado, Dan, if you'd like to take over.
Thanks very much, Christy. I appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. I can see that there's quite a few of you that have taken time out to join us, hear the things that we have to say. And, you know, I always want to start by saying that I hope that we can add value to everybody's situation that we're dealing with right now. It's unique times, and we're certainly in this together. And most importantly, we want you to know that IVCi is here to help. If there's things that we can do, that's what we want to do. Our goal and effort is to put our best foot forward in being a solid partner and sharing the expertise that we have when it's needed the most. As Christy mentioned, one of the things that we'd like to do is kick off with Q&A. A lot of times you join webinars and you're forced to sit through 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes even an hour's worth of content to get to ask your questions. We know that it is a challenging time and that many of you came today with the hopes either of having questions answered or being able to ask questions. And rather than make you wait 30 to 40 minutes to get your questions answered, I would certainly invite any of you that have questions now to ask them. I will do my best to answer them, or if it's something that I feel like we're going to cover over the course of the webinar, I'll let you know that as well, so that we can make sure that we get your questions answered. As those first questions start to come in, I wanted to kick off with 5 tips for working remotely. For those of you that have met me before, or for those of you that have had an opportunity to hear me speak, you'll know that I'm not one that likes to read the slides to you. We included the text. Feel free to read it. We're happy to distribute all of these slides to you after the webinar is over. But I do want to talk to each of the tips that are here, right? And they start by, and a lot of these things you've seen, and maybe you've read them. You could have read them in real news. You could have read them in BuzzFeed format, which is probably more fun than some of the other formats of reading them in. But these are the 5 that I think, and that we as a group collectively within the IVCi team think from a generic perspective are really important for people to master. If you're new to working at home, create a separation between work life and home life, especially now where we're being asked to social distance from ourselves. When you're working from home, sometimes it's good to create family distance. Family distance can be as simple as a closed door, a closed curtain, or moving to a different floor of the home. But find a way to remove yourself from areas that you want to feel like home. This is why people say don't work in bed. This is why people say don't work from the couch, because when you do things like this, it limits those places to be in a available for you as an individual to enjoy them and to have comfort in them. So as you're new to the work from home environment, establish a location for yourself to work and give yourself the ability to create some distance between the work life and the home life. As with in many ways along the same lines, it's learning to be respectful of each other's work environments. Many of us have never worked side by side with members of our families before, whether that's your spouse, whether that's a sibling, whether that's a child, whatever the situation may be in your particular home. There are plenty of opportunities for us to learn and experience the work habits of others that we may not be familiar with. Remember, as we're going through an adjustment period that everybody is trying to adjust, I know a lot of these things sound and feel very parent-like, and that's a lot of what it is in these situations, is trying to remember that everybody's new to it and we're all making adjustments. But consistency, establishing a workspace and having that break between it is going to be important. Along the same times is managing your time when you're at home. It's difficult with all of the potential distractions that sit around us. That's anywhere from having our kids at home that aren't in school, that are in need of help or support, or content or activities or things to keep them going. It's important to remember that while you're at work, that you're able to create work-life balance for yourself, because we're all in this together. We all recognize that we're going through similar situations, but it's just as important for you to be able to manage the time that you're working as work time, and then manage the time that you're not working as time that you're away from work. Trying to balance both all the time can lead to things feeling a little bit sloppy and disorganized. Give yourself the opportunity to work, even if it's in chunks of time. Focus on being able to achieve a goal, complete a task within a fixed period of time. And even if it's outside of what your normal work routine would be, establishing that routine and maintaining that routine is going to give you a lot better consistency for yourself over the course of the day. I haven't seen too much in by way of questions. I've certainly seen Ruben's comment that he was happy to share with us, and there's certainly been many more of those along the way. People that are really getting to know their family members or spouses for the first times as they're around them. So listen, there's an opportunity to have just as much fun with this as there is to be serious about it. So, use the opportunity to meet your new office mate who may be somebody that you know well, but haven't necessarily spent any time in the office with before.
So Dan, I just wanted to jump in here because we actually do have a question. It's one of the private questions to just the panelists. So does working from home always translate to having a flexible work schedule? How do people go about managing that?
That's an interesting question. For many people, working from home constitutes some degree of flexibility because their positions allow for it. In other positions where folks are operators that may have hours in which they need to be available, the flexibility may not be the same. The concept of flexing hours and working from home in many times, cases, and ways go hand in hand with one another. There is an element of trust that an employer has to an employee when they're in a working from home situation. The important thing that changes between a manager and an employee in those circumstances or under those situations is communication of the task, the goal, and what the expected outcomes are. So if you're managing the outcome rather than managing the hours, you end up in a situation where people don't feel chained to a desk to artificially show presence and say that I'm there when they're really paying attention to something else, but they have an understanding that there is a task at hand or a goal that needs to be accomplished. And that's ultimately what we should be managing towards.
Great answer. I don't have any other questions at the moment. Obviously, we had Ruben's comment, but I don't have any other questions at the moment. So
we'll just keep going. So it's interesting along those same lines that you ask about, splitting up the time, extending the work hours and figuring out what that means. So, it's interesting. Here we go from a situation where some folks are worried about, are you actually working enough? Where in other cases, folks may find themselves overworking and not knowing when to break that cycle, especially as we go from social distancing to family distancing. The more time you spend with your family, you may decide that you may want to work more. And if those are the things that you also may decide that you like your family and you may not want to work quite as much. These are the things where you need to, have an understanding of what your position is, what your responsibilities are, and what it takes for you to be able to complete the assignments and tasks that you have or that you're giving to your team, right? And that's it creates an interesting dynamic where you need to not only understand what it is that you're looking to have somebody accomplish, but how they can accomplish those things under the new working circumstances that is their reality. And then finally is taking care of yourself. There are many studies that show that individuals that work from home that maintain a routine that includes getting up in the morning at the same time they would on any other day that they would go to work, going through a standard routine of getting themselves dressed, putting on professional attire, and getting yourself ready for work, it creates an incredible amount of importance. For somebody that has now been working remote for the better part of a decade, I will tell you that it is, from a personal perspective, it's incredibly important to be able to have a sense of consistency and a sense of purpose. There's only so many days that you can work in your pajamas. There's only so much that you can get done in your sweatpants. Is it certainly applicable to be a little bit more comfortable while you're at home rather than being in an office environment? Absolutely. Feel free to be comfortable, but the idea of having clothes that you work in and having clothes that you play in is no different than establishing a space for you to work in and a space for you to not work in when you're at home. So with all of these things put together, I know that a lot of it sounds like common sense, and many of these things you've seen produced and reproduced over and over and over again. I think sometimes hearing them and talking through it from a real life example is always important. So hopefully those are some decent tips for everybody when it comes to working from home.
Dan, can we pause for a minute and answer
absolutely.
They did say in the beginning that we were going to wait for question and answers.
Put them in.
but you know what? This is how it works working remote. Sometimes, you go off script a little bit. So we did get a really good question from Jeff Jerome. He said, work from home can also mean that we need to participate in or even start committees and now virtual events. Do you have any suggestions for processes and platforms to support that type of activity?
Wow, Jeff, it's like you can see the future and you have some idea of what's forthcoming in the next couple of slides. It's a great question, and I'll give you a little bit of a teaser towards it. The work reality is something that's new for all of us. So there are going to be a plethora of things that are new for people. This may be the very first webinar that some of you have logged on to. You may have been invited to plenty of them, but it was never anything that you bothered to click on before, and these things are becoming the new reality for us. Platforms are a critical portion of this, and if you don't know what that word means, we're going to talk about it a lot in the next couple of minutes. So I promise that we'll get back to it. But Jeff, it's a great question, and it's certainly applicable to today because working from home means working in a different way and communicating in a different way, and that's really what we're going to talk about.
Great. So we do have a question that actually the moderator, I will answer. It's, can I see all questions posted in the question and answer section? So in order to just make sure that we stay on topic and on time, it's so I can see the questions and moderate them appropriately. And as I said in the beginning, for any sort of follow-up that I see any questions that we didn't get answers to, or we need answers to, I will absolutely address it in any sort of follow-up for the webinar as a whole. So I just wanted to make sure I answered that question for you.
So keeping up morale. This is one of my favorite topics and one of my favorite places to start because people forget about this all the time. And right now, more so than ever, I think that this is incredibly important. They say that leaders really rise up when challenges present themselves. This is the time for all of us to be leaders. If you're on this call today, it's because you actively work with technology that will guaranteed support people in their ability to continue to be successful moving forward in today's world. And it's important that we maintain that positive outlook and that we share that. And keeping up morale while working in a remote environment can be incredibly challenging, especially if everybody is new to it all at the same time. So let's talk about some of the things that we need to help maintain human connections and to help all of us figure out what the new feeling is like at work. And if anybody doesn't know what I mean by feeling, I encourage you to go into your office on any given day, and there is a feeling that's in the air. We know whether everybody is happy or sad. We know if people are excited, if the mood is up or down. And you can, as you can imagine right now, the mood is probably one of a bit of nerves and anxiety, as for many of you, I imagine it was right before your offices closed or were about to close, or as people were transferring from an office environment to a home-based environment, given the circumstances. How do we then recreate the social aspects of work that make the working environment what it is and help make our businesses special? Tools like video, events like webinars, tools like web chat or chat clients, regular meetings and touch points that you may not have been having in the past, utilizing technology tools to bring people together are the keys to the castle for any good manager to create and develop a sense of morale during this time. Company culture can be established and celebrated by small wins. You've got the ability to use tools like these, tools like Workplace by Facebook, tools like Zoom, tools like WebEx Teams, tools that offer you tools like Hangouts by Google, where you have the ability to create social platforms for communication, sharing ideas, working together. Slack gives you the ability to work together. All of these tools that we're talking about are platforms, which we'll discuss as we get a little bit further into the presentation. But these platforms give you the ability to utilize them to create human connections. We would encourage you to use the tools as much as you possibly can and learn about them, because there's many powerful things you can do. I like to give real world examples from the teams that I manage or the teams that I have managed. there's a group of individuals within IVCi that I like to talk about. These are the pre-sales engineering team. And for those of you that are on the call that are from IVCi today, you know the team that we're talking about. For those of you that are new to us from the outside, you have for those of us that are new from the outside, the pre-sales engineering team are the wonderful group of individuals that help design all of the fixed installation solutions that IVCi delivers. Of that team, which consists of about 12 folks on a regular basis, 2 of them worked in the same place and the other 10 were scattered across the United States of America. And this is at IVCi today. This goes back just a couple months ago to when I was managing that team in addition to other stuff that was going on. That team met and still does to this day, meets every day for 30 minutes. The people on that call have, in most cases, never met each other in person. We brought a new person onto the team at the end of last year, going into the beginning of this year. And when that person joined the team, following their first week of work, we asked them to fill out some information following their onboarding to ask what was the best part about their experience thus far. And the feedback that we got back was that the people were really the best part of the experience, and so much so that they even let me in on all of their inside jokes. And as a manager of that team, the thing that hit me the most was that I have a team of people that never work in the exact same place at all, and have almost guaranteed never met each other, and yet we have inside jokes. At that point, you realize that morale and culture and socialization can exist very well within a virtual environment, just as it exists within an office environment. So by all means, I would encourage anybody to be creative and come up with ideas. That same team, we did a lot of stuff in terms of building morale. That same team, we would invite in a guest once a week to join us in our ridiculousness. And we would always do something fun. We'd have theme days. Everybody would get on video and you'd see all the different things that show up in their space during that period of time. Always an interesting opportunity to create culture remotely. It does create the need for creativity. It does force you to think outside of the box. And it does force people to need to participate. If there was ever a need to participate, now is the time, not just for us as leaders, but for people on the team as well. Let's keep moving a little bit. Let's talk about running meetings, hosting and working inside of a remote environment. Platform is so important. So I mentioned it in the beginning. Jeff asked about it as a question, and here's really where we're going to talk about it. The platforms that exist in today's environments are essential for the success of your team. And if you don't have an operating platform, or if you're operating across multiple platforms, if you don't know how to make them work with each other, if you're new to all of this and none of it makes any sense to you, if you're going to take nothing else away from today, understanding what it means to utilize the proper platform, how you communicate, how your teams communicate. Right now is a time where if you don't have an established protocol, people are trying everything. And at the moment, all of the companies, for the most part, are giving away their services for free to some extent. And it's difficult and challenging to understand which of those platforms are right for you. We can help you with things. We can help you with the evaluation and the understanding of which platforms fit your needs, but look for a platform that services more than just one thing at a time. And when I say more than just one thing at a time, I mean, there has to be the opportunity for the platform to enable success for your team. And you have to make the decisions today about what does success mean. Is success in the short term? Is success, how are we going to be successful for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks while we may be forced to be outside of an office? Or is success for your team, what happens if we need to be in this set of circumstances for the next 6 months or for the next year or for some unknown period of time? Or perhaps this is now a style of work that you'll want to continue moving forward into the future, Or even if you don't, you'll want to maintain it to some extent so that you have it in the event that, God forbid, we ever all have to go through things like this again. These are all the things that have to be thought about, discussed, and understood when it comes to selecting a platform for success. Again, IVCi works with many, many partners. We try our best to be agnostic as possible because we recognize that there are many answers to all of the questions that all of you have, and there is not one necessarily 100% correct solution that fits every shape and size. Therefore, our goal is to help you understand as individuals how to select a platform that will fulfill the needs that you have. But understanding what a platform is, how your platforms work, and how they integrate or interoperate with other platforms is critical to the success of working remotely. As you're working through the platforms that you're on, when you're actually up and established in terms of operating and having meetings, understanding how to deal with disruptions is incredibly important in the new work environment that we live in. And I need to look no further than to myself again for real life examples. As somebody who's been doing this for the more than half of my career at this point, I was on a call with my team just yesterday when one of my children decided it was appropriate to FaceTime me. Not necessarily ideal in that moment. For those of you that think, oh great, just grab your phone and mute it. I work on a Mac. FaceTime rings on my computer. I'm on a video call. My phone's ringing. My other phone is ringing. My computer is ringing. My kids call back. My son happens to be autistic and he likes to do things repetitively. So if you couldn't guess, he called like 17 more times in a row over the course of that call. Plan for disruptions. These things are going to happen. And if we learn, understand, and treat them as professionals and accept that that's part of what the reality is that we're faced with today, it makes life a lot easier. Everybody on that call got a good laugh yesterday out of it, A, because it was happening to me, and B, because I ultimately told my son at one point when I answered the call with everybody on it to go and chase down my wife. Everybody got a good kick out of that one. But the truth of the matter is nobody was put off by it, surprised, and the meeting didn't crash because we all recognize that that's the circumstance that we're in today. If everybody thinks back to the BBC video where the gentleman was live on screen doing a broadcast and his small child, crept into the room, and then you see the wife kind of crawl in out of the corner and grab the baby. Hilarious, makes for great TV, has been amazing memes, great to enjoy. Truthfully, if you think of that situation and imagine what would have happened if that gentleman had just grabbed the child, popped him on his knee, and continued on as if it was nothing. It's a challenge to do that. It's a new experience for all of us, but we all have to recognize that we're working in a new climate today, and these are some of the things that we just have to be cognizant of. Obviously, good behaviors, learning to mute your microphone, avoid disruptions behind you, whether that's through the use of drapes or curtains or just asking people to minimize the movement behind you. It's certainly important to create to minimize distractions as much as possible, but to address disruptions in a professional way without letting it completely derail your meeting. Next is talking about meeting participation. Challenging. Meeting participation can be challenged. I imagine some of you are challenged right now over the course of this webinar to pay attention to it, whether that's because you're either looking at things that are off to your side, you may find some of the content interesting, or you're just hanging on in the hopes that some of it gets more interesting as you go. Regardless of what your set of circumstances may be, we know that there's lots of distractions around you. Meetings in the virtual world get shorter because if you have an agenda and you work your way through a meeting, you can cut out a lot of the side parts that go with it. I've taken part in meetings before where they ask people to do hands up meetings. Everybody's got to sit with their hands up and they're visible, so that it means that people are staying off of their keyboards. There's lots of different ways to generate participation, but I promise you, if you don't seek participation from the people that are in your teams, if you're not looking at them, attempting to make eye contact through video, and either communicating with lots of people, pointing them out, calling to them, talking to them along the way, people will do other things on the side. So do your best to ensure that you've got as much participation as you possibly can have.
So Dan, I just want to jump in here in regards to dealing with disruption. So as you said, I think that as a whole, you'd like people to start handling interruptions and things like that in stride. And as it also really does appeal to the idea that it's a humanistic experience and it's not just so stiff and professional. Let's say something really embarrassing does happen though, you know, whether it's, you know, someone stands up and they don't have pants on. What is the rebound for that really? Because that is, I mean, there are things that need to be addressed in a professional manner. What are the best things to do?
Absolutely. Well, you know, someone standing up without pants on could certainly create a challenge, depending what else they had on. But that being said, there will be times when inevitably something will go sideways, and it is, you know, listen, it's a reality that it is going to happen at some point in time. It's happened to everybody at least once, and it will continue to happen to people over and over again. I think the most beneficial advice that I could give to people is, if it's your meeting and you're responsible for the meeting, generating a sense of order and control, either by utilizing the tools that you have within the platform that you've chosen as a meeting host to either exit people that can't figure out how to behave properly in meetings, or to mute participants. You can mute all of the participants and then control the floor to be able to, you know, restore order within the space. Or simply, if things, you know, if people can't learn good etiquette when it comes to being a participant in video, there's plenty of opportunities to educate them on what proper etiquette is and use it as a learning experience and a growing experience, and hopefully you don't have to encounter it too many times.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. Figured
Absolutely.
you'd wake anybody up with that question.
Yeah, it's easy to wake people up when you start talking about people standing up and not being all there. I see a great question that came in, and I want to jump right to this one. So the question that was asked, if anybody didn't see it, was if we have an established platform within our organization, however, our clients and customers work on multiple platforms, what challenges may we encounter? You could encounter quite a few challenges if you're working across multiple platforms. Interoperability is a challenge that is faced by many people, and it is a challenge that many people weren't aware that they were about to face because they had used their remote work tools in limited capacity. It's one of the more common situations that we've seen come up, where people are used to limited amounts of communication for the remote worker or the remote employee. And the majority of those pieces of communication have been internal. And now all of a sudden, everybody is communicating not only internally, where you may have common platform, but now you're in a situation where you're communicating externally. And common platform may not be so common anymore. There are a number of solutions, PEXIP being one of the leading solutions and one of IVCi's great partners, that is certainly a pathway to interoperability. It's difficult to be able to, again, say that there is specifically one solution or call out one particular organization that meets the needs across the board for everybody, but interoperability certainly is a challenge. It's important to understand what your platforms are to begin with, what level of built-in interoperability they have, and then how on the back end, or if your platforms themselves cannot support that interoperability independently, what tools can you apply to the back end to help create additional interoperability? Understanding how you work, understanding how the partners that you need to communicate with works will help create a situation where you can plan tools to be able to either leverage your platform to do more, or to migrate to a platform that can allow you to do the things that you need to do, or add a platform to your mix. So again, there's, you know, the fun and simultaneously challenging parts about AV are that there are generally more than one answer to every question and multiple ways to interpret the multiple answers that exist to the question. It's what keeps it fun, and it's also what makes it challenging.
Dan, can I piggyback that? We actually had another question come in regards to security. So obviously our IT friends out there, that's always their main concern in a lot of different platforms and stuff. As far as security is concerned, how do these platforms handle security, and how can they guarantee that especially if it's something like financial information that's being crossed and passed back and forth, how is that addressed?
That's a great question, Christy. I don't know. I don't know that, again, that there's one answer that we can give that's going to cover everybody. Multiple platforms offer multiple levels of security. Different platforms offer different feature sets. The type of data and information that is being shared, and these are questions that come up all the time from IT departments that go through long reviews before they bring a platform in or allow a platform for use. And now all of a sudden, very quickly, you have organizations where employees are doing things that, generally you would say that these are rogue behaviors in terms of using communication tools that may not be sanctioned, if you will, by a particular organization. But in the moment of needing to communicate, this is what you pick up and use. There's all sorts of regulatory challenges to look at. There's compliance issues to look at. There are multiple factors when it goes into what constitutes security and what you have to teach your employees about how to maintain security. Companies that haven't had policy on work from home or establish protocol for work from home, or how to utilize the tools that may be available, whether you can get them as an individual or whether the business is subscribing to those services. It's really, really important to have an understanding of what the needs of your team is and how the tools that exist allow you to execute on that, because security for each individual organization has its own set of requirements that go with it. And in addition to having those sets of requirements, the tools that are available offer different outcomes. So it's important to work with somebody that can help you understand all of those things, establish quickly what fits within the guidelines of your organization, and then allows you to be able to get back to work, which is ultimately the goal.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. So one last piece that we like to talk about, or at least that I like to talk about, is about managing a remote team. As I've said before, I've had a decade plus of experience managing remote workforce. That workforce has spanned the United States. It has spanned continents and around the globe, handling multiple time zones, working with employees that have different levels of technological understanding, working across platforms. These are all things that are going to come up along the way. As a manager, one of the most important things that I stress to people is learn and understand the platforms that your organization has put forth in front of you. Or if you're managing the technology, make sure that you work with the managers inside of your business to understand what their needs are when it comes to how to manage your team. When it comes to working across time zones, sometimes it's up to the actual individual to just understand you got to wake up a little bit earlier, or you got to stay up a little bit later. And since we're all at home, the challenges associated with that are far less than what they used to be. It's the reality of dealing with some of these. It's the reality of dealing with some of the things that are thrust in front of us at this point in time. Establishing trust is the ultimate end goal when it comes to a work from home environment. And for any manager to be successful in having a remote team, trust is paramount to that success. Trust in many ways is earned and not given. And I understand that. And I would encourage you to earn the trust of your team by seeing that they are completing the tasks that are set forth in front of them over the coming days and weeks. But also have an understanding that the time in which they executed or the ways in which they communicate about their execution may be different. Establish routines where people can come to know and have consistency for you. They don't see you in the same way that they used to see you physically in the office. Let them understand when they can expect to see you in the virtual capacity, over the course of your workday, whether that's daily touch points, either in the morning or in an afternoon, whether that's group chats or emails, or other online collaboration tools that exist. Use these tools. Manage to the extent that the applications and the platforms let you, and work to make sure that the platforms that you're using have the types of tools that you need in order to be successful. I think I saw another question come in about bandwidth.
Yes.
So,
Dan, we have we're going to run a little bit over, which is
sure.
fine. You know, obviously for everyone else that needs to jump off, of course, by all means, jump off. We'll send the recording as promised. So we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So someone did come through. They said, what is the recommended bandwidth for home collaboration scenarios?
Well, the answer is going to be the same thing as you would hear all the time, right? More is better when it comes to recommended bandwidth. If you have the opportunity to know and understand your home environment, obviously the more bandwidth that you can get, the better. The other thing to understand is how you chop up the bandwidth that you have available to you while you're at home. If you have enough technical understanding or enough technical resource, you can carve up the bandwidth that you have available to you and prioritize things like voice and video at points in time, or you can do things like throttle how much bandwidth certain devices, maybe like your kids' iPads have over the course of any given day or any given time period, so that you can control the amount of available bandwidth for priority applications like voice and video over the course of the day. But there is no, this is exactly how much bandwidth you need, but certainly the more the better at this point.
Excellent. So we have time, I believe, for one more question. Adoption, coming from a user standpoint and an implementation standpoint, are there resources available to increase the adoption, especially when you're already working remote?
Absolutely. So, and that's a fantastic question. End user adoption is critical for the success of all of this. For anybody that doesn't know what end user adoption means, or those words sound weird, or it's like a whole strange fancy phrasing of something. End user adoption is, are people using it? That's really what the question is. How do we get people to use all of this stuff? Training is certainly available. Even things like these webinars, training is available, printed materials are available, online live or recorded videos are available. If people are in a situation today where they feel like they don't understand well enough, or if a business is in need of a structured education and learning program for their communication applications, those are absolutely things that, if they don't exist, can be produced, or if you need them specific to your organization for the ways in which you're communicating, are certainly things that can be developed quickly and deployed to your organization to help end users learn how to operate in this new environment. For organizations that have top tier executives that are new to the work from home environment, there are opportunities for services to the extent of white glove support of a live operator that can walk through executives on exactly how to use the systems in front of them, connect calls and dial out to them to make the experience either easier for them, and basically attend to all of their technology needs. IVCi is here to help with those services, with those training and support services, with executive support staff services, with helping you understand communication platforms, with helping you get set up with the hardware, tools, services, software support, and most importantly, the information that you need to be successful working in today's challenging times. On behalf of myself, I'd like to take the opportunity to just say thanks to everybody that spent a little bit of time with us today. If there are topics that you're interested in information on, certainly please let us know. Our intent is to continue to host these type of events on a regular basis to share with you whatever new information we have, whatever relevant things we can bring to the table to continue to share and help as much as we can so that we can all, make it through what we're dealing with today in the world and find as much of a successful outcome as we can. So thank you all very much.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you so much for taking some time out today to help us out with all this very helpful information, especially for all of us who are kind of thrusted into this work remote situation that maybe weren't expecting it. So we're going to end the webinar just because it is, we're about 5 minutes past our original ending time. We did get some questions that came through that we didn't get to, but I promise we will address them in some of the email follow-ups. So we're going to be doing the email follow-ups. You will get an on-demand recording, and you'll also get some helpful content as well as some contact information. So if there's anything that you have any questions about that you'd like to reach out to us for, we are available. We are working. We are not in the office. Many of us are not in the office anymore, but we are available for anything you guys might need. So second to Dan, thank you so much for taking the time out. We know things are a little bit crazy right now, and we hope this really helped everybody out. Again, reach out to us for anything, okay? So thanks so much, everybody. Come back again when we do another webinar, and thanks again, Dan.